The King of the Battlefield Chapter 51. Stop at least 3 waves while you're barely alive. Then it would start the moment he was on the brink of death. He had to get into that state before the next wave to be able to properly stop 3 waves in a row. As it was a special reward, he couldn't leave an ambiguous record. Self-injury. The first method he thought of was self-injury. If it was regarding body parts, Myung was an expert. It wasn't hard to leave someone barely alive. When he trained in the Forest of Death, a forceful command to commit suicide once his identity was revealed was implanted in his mind. Countless assassins died following the command Wang Chunlin implanted in them. My body's resisting. Was it because of this? Myung placed anguish close to his wrist before shaking his head slightly. He wasn't willing to. Perhaps it was due to him deciding to walk the path against Wang Chunlin that his body cried out as it instinctively wanted to do everything opposite of what Wang Chunlin did. What was more, this was a battlefield. It was a place created for battles. To self-inflict wounds wasn't self-injury but closer to suicide. Black Sun Warrior. So Myung decided on another solution. Since he was going to be on the brink of death anyways, he chose a slightly more honest method. The Black Sun Warrior who wore a full black armor gazed at Myung. He was the strongest undead Myung had and was the best rising star of the Sun Guild when he was alive. Wasn't he named after the sun god Horus? If Myung didn't kill him, he would have rapidly become stronger. However, currently, he was an undead that followed Myung. Myung held anguish up towards the Black Sun Warrior and said, "Attack me like you want to kill me." Slash. There wasn't a moment of hesitation. The Black Sun Warrior cast the Sword of the Black Sun skill from his hands. He shot towards Myung while emitting an aura that wanted to slash everything in the world. Although he was stronger than when he fought Horus, the Black Sun Warrior had also been strengthened. Crash. Myung, who clashed with the sword, was pushed away. He immediately held anguish in reverse and lowered his stance. Then he bounced off the ground and aimed for the Black Sun Warrior's belly. Thump. The wings of the Black Sun Warrior blocked Myung's attack. However, Myung anticipated that. The Black Sun Warrior's sword shot out between his wings of light. Myung rolled on the ground and quickly threw 2 daggers in a row. But it only looked like he threw 1 dagger. It was only possible because the paths the 2 daggers were flying in were identical. Cling! Clang! The first dagger broke in 2 but the second one was blocked by the armor. If it wasn't for the armor, it would have been a critical blow. His high defense wasn't just for show. In reality, he barely received any damage when facing the dark red orc Warkif. Not bad. He had never fought against one of his undead. He never really felt the need to, and he thought that it would be much better to hunt other prey than wounding his undead. A completely new experience. Myung became absorbed into the fight. It had been quite a while since he had fought one-on-one. Because Myung's profession specialized in one-on-one fights, it felt like he had only just put on the right set of clothes. Let's see how long you can block. The Black Sun Warrior had high defense. He wouldn't leave a scratch with most of his attacks. Didn't even the dark red orc Warkif fail to leave a decent mark? Myung used all his techniques. Bam! Clash! The intense fight continued for hours. The fairy Wuhi was stunned as she watched the Black Sun Warrior and Myung fight. Ahem, was the condition so hard he went crazy? She touched her lips with her finger and tilted her head. She could only see it as him going crazy. In a situation where it wasn't enough that they were saving all their strength, they were fighting each other. A bloody battle with no compromises. It wouldn't be weird if one of them died. However, something strange occurred. The more they fought, the faster their movements became. It was only a slight difference, but Wuhi, who had seen countless monsters, could tell that they were growing every time their swords clashed. But can the undead get stronger too? Then Wuhi, who had realized something strange, blinked her eyes. Even if she could accept Myung's growth as humans had rapid growth potential, the undead were monsters created from corpses. A dead creature wouldn't get stronger. Like that, the undead would stop growing from when they died. But, when that undead wearing black armor clashed with Muyang, he was getting stronger at a slightly slower pace than him. It wasn't that he became more skilled, but his absolute stats were rising. Well, he. Fight, fight. The winning side is Well He's side. But afterwards, her worries melted away like snow. Well He cheered while flailing her arms and legs around. Well He wasn't the type to worry for long. The two fought to kill. She was satisfied as long as she could see this entertaining scene. How long did they fight for? When Muyang's body was becoming a rag, a new change appeared. Messages that made even Muyang, who was absorbed in the fight, stop for a bit. Stop! Muyang raised his hand and restrained him. Immediately, the Black Sun warrior stood in his place. Muyang frowned. He grew stronger. It didn't make sense. Although it wasn't like there weren't any undead who could get stronger, it was extremely rare. There were monsters like vampires who grew stronger by sucking blood, or monsters like specters who increased their spirit power by extorting their enemies' lives. In other words, monsters who had an appetite. However, the Black Sun warrior was different. He was getting stronger simply by fighting against Muyang. Why? This never happened when he fought others. That was right. If there was a cause, it was fighting with Muyang. Did I affect him? To make sure of this, he changed his target. Blazing Spear Soldier, Sorceress of Lighting. Attack me. I will, follow your orders. The two had become his enemies. Although his body was already exhausted, Muyang was like a fish in water as he fought without rest. However, as his vision became hazy, Muyang couldn't help but find it odd. Only the Black Sun warrior grew stronger. No matter how long he fought with the Blazing Spear Soldier or the Sorceress of Lightning, their stats didn't increase. As he wondered why, Muyang came to a conclusion. Art score. Only the Black Sun warrior had an art score greater than 80. Then did it mean that only those who had an art score above 80 could get stronger like him? This was a very important discovery. If his hypothesis was correct, then Muyang would be able to create a much stronger undead army. In the very least, he would try harder to create an undead with an art score of 80 or higher. If they grew stronger by fighting with Muyang, it was definitely one of the hidden abilities of the Death Lord. So I was thinking inside the box. Then he smiled bitterly. If he didn't have a prejudice that the undead couldn't grow, he might have figured it out already. Are you really going to face the next wave in that state? No matter how I look at it, it seems stupid. I'm going to. Muyang immediately replied to Wu He's question. However, his whole body was bleeding. He was suffering from blood loss and his mind was fuzzy. He was really on the brink of death. However, he barely held his sword and found the strength to move. Wu He clicked her tongue. Recklessness is the shortcut to death. Though your growth rate is outstanding considering you're a human. It seems like you have become sharper in a few hours. It is interesting. 40 years. Hey. It took me 40 years to get to where I am. You became stronger in a short time. You are abnormal. These words were directed at Muyang. But, Muyang wanted to disagree. The past 40 years of experience and information created the current Muyang. If an artist who drew for 40 years was to draw an incredible picture in 5 minutes, people would normally react with "you completed in 5 minutes. You're amazing," but the artist had spent 40 years to produce that picture in 5 minutes. It was the same for Muyang. It was only obvious that he would grow quickly because he had already experienced power once. In the very least, he would be able to catch up to his previous self without rest. You are a weird human. Anyways, try your best. Well, he circled around in the air with her arms crossed. Not long after, the next wave began. I will make the impossible possible. Muyang's eyes settled down. The fairy He couldn't believe it. Is that really a human? What in the world? With a body that seemed like it would fall with a touch, he really beat the 16th wave. Though the undead did help a lot, Muyong's performance was the same if not better than before. Still, this must be his end. He shook her head. It seemed like a special skill was activated when he was in a critical condition, but even that would end here. The next monsters would be trolls. They had a terrifying regenerative power. And like expected, the fight was long. The undead were stomped on and Muyong's arm was twisted as it hung on one side. It was amazing that he even endured it. But, another reversal happened. Impossible. He annihilated the trolls. And Muyong challenged the next wave right away. Since he knew that there wouldn't be a good end if he stayed in a critical condition for a long time, he quickly challenged one wave after the other unlike before. However, no matter how times you thought about it, it was impossible. His body was at its limit. He could tell that even breathing was painful. He pushed his body with only raw determination. He has surpassed the limits of a warrior. It's like he's someone who had died a few times. Those who were known as warriors had a tendency to become stronger when they were on the brink of death. Muyong had already passed that. Unless he was someone to moved within the boundaries of death, it was impossible to move like that. He slowly changed from watching Muyong's fight for fun to watching it with a nervous heart. With sweaty fists and bulging eyes, she didn't miss a single moment of the fight. It was the first time she felt this way while watching someone fight. You can do it. Human. You can do it. Unconsciously. Her eyes were drawn to fight as she cheered for him. Whenever Muyong's body stretched, He's body felt sore. To make spectators become completely immersed in it. It was one of the qualities only those known as heroes possessed. Splash! The fight ended as the last Ark Goblin's neck was cut off. Thump! Muyong fell to his knees. He stabbed anguish into the ground and was barely able to stop himself from fainting. In that state, he forced himself up and approached He. Give it to me. Here. He took out a cloud-shaped tool with a foolish expression. Little wish. He had finally reached his goal. A treasure that would grant 3 small wishes. Afterwards, Muyong examined the condition of his body. Any more would be tough. Although he could use Little Wish to recover his body, he didn't think he could beat the 20th wave with his current abilities. Less than 100 undead remained. Perhaps it was because the troll's vitality was strong, but it wasn't easy to make them into undead. At most, he could cast the Art of Death skill 15 times. With that, he would still be lacking. He asked. You're going to end here, right? Looks like it. Come back next time. You can get an incredibly special reward when you beat the 30th wave. The 30th wave, she said. It was currently too far away. But, he didn't remember hearing about anyone stopping the 30th wave and getting an incredibly special reward. When he glanced at He, her face reddened as she wriggled her body. He. You can have me. Give me something else. Damn it, I bet you don't know how popular I am with other fairies. Muyong only grinned. However, he couldn't promise when he would return to the endless battlefield. He couldn't return the same way he came in this time. If he wanted to return to the endless battlefield, he had to find something else besides the marble the fire tars had. He continued. Make sure you come again. I will be waiting for you. As if she suddenly became lonely, He nodded weakly. Shoo. Then He suddenly pressed her lips against Muyong's cheek. Immediately after, a bright light wrapped around Muyong. 1 No name 18th stage. 2 None. 3 None. Chapter 52, The Outlaw, 1. He bounced out of the marble. At the same time, he stumbled as a wave of dizziness came over him. He had a critical injury that made one wonder how he didn't die on the spot. If he didn't quickly heal himself, it couldn't be reversed. The goblin returned. The fire tar who stood beside the marble yelled out loud. Soon, the vice chieftain came to see Muyong. He raised his shoulders and murmured to himself. 18th wave. The number 18 was written on Muyong's left shoulder. A number like this was written on everyone who entered the endless battlefield and completed the waves. The vice chieftain looked at the number with doubtful eyes. He never thought a mere goblin would have exceeded beyond the 10th wave. Even a goblin king would reach his limit on the 15th wave. But, Muyong was here and had advanced way past the criteria he provided him. The mood changed. Other fire tars were no longer able to disregard Muyong. Start the treatment for the goblin, know the warrior. They couldn't allow someone who was recognized as a warrior to die in vain. Warriors had the right to be properly respected. The fire tars held an emergency meeting. The goblin had completed the 18th wave of the warrior's ceremony. Hey, how unbelievable! He didn't even faint when he was getting treated. In that condition. Instead, didn't he threaten the vice chieftain as he glared at him? I saw it too. He said to keep his promise if vice chieftain was a fire tar of honor. Then, he kept his eyes on the fire tars. He seemed like he didn't trust anyone. Impudent. Did he think one of our fire tars was going to hurt him? Since he has passed the warrior's ceremony to that extent, he needs to be treated as a warrior. Ugh! A goblin being treated as a warrior? There was no precedent for it in the past. And because of what they have already said, they couldn't take it back now. They never expected a goblin like him among the goblins they have looked down on and disregarded. The wind has changed. The vice chieftain was pleased as he looked at the scene. The goblin did well. He really did stir up the stubborn elders. Let's hear about his suggestion. Since he has proven himself as a warrior, it mustn't be just a lie that he could fix the problem with the plum tree. Do you vice chieftain really believe he can solve this? That it's right for us to move our village? Of course, there were still those who opposed. There was no way them to easily accept the idea of them moving their village. However, they weren't furious like how they were when it was first brought up. It was a tremendous development. As the vice chieftain, my thoughts are we need to listen to what the warrior has to say. To be honest, it's not like we can just be laid back about it. At most 10 years from now. After that time, we need to wander around until we find another plum tree. The vice chieftain stroked the long roots around his waist. It was the roots of the plum tree. Without this root, the fire tar would not be able to overcome their own flames and in the end, would self-destruct. They had to periodically replace it, but if they couldn't find the next plum tree in time, the whole tribe would be wiped out. It would be a disgrace for the monster of all monsters, the fire tars, to die this way. However, plum trees were rapidly dying out in the underworld. Only God knew when they might be able to find another. What if he is wrong? We will be humiliated by the other tribes. The vice chieftain crumbled his expression in frustration. On the other hand, if we succeed, the fire tars of other tribes will look at us differently. We might be a bit humiliated if we fail, but there is a lot more to gain than lose. On top of that, these frustrating people. The vice chieftain truly did think that. They were warriors who thought their honor was more important than their life. Although he understood them, this problem took priority over their honor. The plum tree. The mother of this land. What conditions are needed to treat our mother? That's enough. The chieftain who quietly watched the whole scene suddenly spoke. Everyone, including the vice chieftain, became quiet. Then, the chieftain nodded. I will listen to what the goblin has to say. If he is telling the truth, we will treat him as a warrior and our savior, but if he is lying, I will personally punish him. Gulp. There was tension in everyone's expressions. When the chieftain said that he would personally punish someone, it meant that he would end them with a duel. It had been ages since he last dueled anyone. However, everyone knew of the chieftain's power. The absolute fire tar who couldn't be beaten even against 10 regular fire tars. If he was to come forward, there was no hope for even a great goblin. The only way for the goblin to live was to prove that he was right. After the treatment was complete, Muyeong got up from his spot right away. He was given a bit of free time, but he wasn't really tense. Instead, he was organizing the things he earned from the endless battlefield with his mind at ease. Little Wish, Fairy's Blessing, Hermes's Boots, and the Talisman of Ogre's Strength. 4 in total. From the random A-ranked talismans, he received the Talisman of Ogre's Strength. It was quite a rare talisman that allowed you to strengthen an equipment. Hermes's Boots. Little Wish and the Talisman were things he was somewhat familiar with, but the other two were things even Muyeong hadn't seen before. Hermes's boots were jet black. As he looked carefully at the boots to confirm it, information regarding the boots popped up. Name, Hermes's Boots. Rank, A+. Classification, A keepable type. Durability, 24,000. Effect, Shadow Lord's Present. It was one of the shoes Hermes wore. Asterisk agility plus 15. Asterisk able to use acceleration for 3 seconds. The information shown was simple. A and rank. It was the highest ranked equipment Muyeong currently possessed. On top of that, Muyeong became slightly more surprised reading the last message. Acceleration. Muyeong knew about acceleration more than anyone else. It was because it was an ability that allowed you to move your body twice as fast. In the past, Muyeong had used an equipment with acceleration to assassinate the Dragon Lord. Wang Chunglin had lent it to Muyeong and its effects were amazing. It was only 3 seconds, but 3 seconds were enough to turn the tables around. Plus 15 in agility can't be ignored either. Like the word itself, it was the number that showed the body's agility, but if you thought one step further, it placed high importance in increasing the scope of a person's senses. Most would call it the 5 senses. The senses that allow you to detect danger and notice an enemy approaching from behind. Agility was an important stat, especially for Muyeong. He wore the Hermes's boots right away. I should check out what Fairy's Blessing is. It was the blessing that appeared as he kissed his cheek. It was the first time he had seen it, so he was more curious. He turned the status viewer and opened it right away. Achievement effect. Grimoire's Anguish, A, +3 to all abilities. Soulmate, B+, from now on, if you commune with an undead, the undead's stats will slightly increase permanently. Azura's Vassal, A, the strength to deal with spirits and devil's power, spirit ability increased by 10. Fairy's Blessing, B, allows fairies to feel familiar with the user. Class effect. Death Lord, Lord class, ruler of death. Stats. Strength 90, 67 plus 23, agility 104, 71 plus 33. Stamina 93, 68 plus 25, intelligence 56, 34 plus 22. Wisdom 60, 38 plus 22, Fighting Aura 60, 42 plus 18. Magic Resistance 30, 12 plus 18, Spirit Ability 38, 10 plus 28. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Equipped and invoked equipment, Anguish, Strength plus 5, Lunatic Sovereign's Set, all stats plus 15, Stamina plus 10, Shadow Armor. It allows you to teleport to a shadow within your vision 3 times a day. Wicked Belt, Intelligence and Wisdom plus 4, all undead are strengthened by 5%, and Hermes's Boots, Agility plus 15, 3 seconds of acceleration. Allows fairies to feel familiar with the user. I need to meet one to know what kind of blessing it is. Muyeong shrugged his shoulders. He felt like he could only know its effects only when he met one. And, his agility stats passed 100 as he wore the Hermes's boots. It was the same as him passing through 1 out of 5 walls. Of course, his pure stats were far away, but if you just simply looked at it, it did pass 100. Also, if his main stats all passed 500, they say that he could become a transcendent being. Even in his past, Muyong wasn't able to enter the area of transcendent beings. To say it correctly, he was half of a transcendent being. Since his agility did pass 500. Thanks to this, he succeeded in assassinating the Dragon Lord. Although, it took him few years to find that one chance. Goblin, the time is up. Vice Chieftain came into the room Muyong was in. Muyong nodded and raised his body. But Goblin, what's your name? Muyong. Muyong, I'm Augur. The Vice Chieftain, Augur, lightly introduced himself. It was a simple exchange, but the meaning wasn't as simple. At least, it meant that Augur was considering Muyong as a true warrior. If you solve the problem of the Pum tree, we will consider you as our savior. Muyong chuckled after listening to his words. The savior of a monster. It's interesting. But, even that didn't seem bad at all. Muyong restated what he had told Augur. He brought the bugs and provided evidence in a blunt manner. Silver tongue? There was no way Muyong would have such a thing. He just spoke the truth. However, that truth and the small evidence created an unexpected change. With a fierce look in his eyes, he declared that he would move the village. And after exactly 10 days, visible improvements had appeared. The Plutonian beetle hatched its eggs and hundreds of its babies were eating up the aphids. Not only that, but birds started to fly in to eat up the giant aphids which grew without any natural predators. Of course, they would need more time, but in just 10 days the Pum tree became more lustrous. The dying leaves gave out a green color and the surrounding ground became more fertile. Looking at the amazing result, the fire tars were happy on one side but couldn't help but taste bitter emotions on the other. As it was proof that their existence was killing the Pum tree. They never expected Muyong to use natural predators to solve the problem. No, it was never thought of. From the beginning, the fire tars never had any natural predators. There was no way that they would think about using that relationship. A goblin who came out of nowhere suddenly became their savior. Do you have anything you want? Now, all the fire tars couldn't help but acknowledge him. As the noises settled down, the chieftain personally came to Muyong. This land has been very unkind to me. I want to hunt a prey that's suited for me and become stronger. Muyong restated what he had said in the past. First, I need to hunt a bit. This was the territory of the demon god. There was no way for fire tars to keep an eye on him all the time. He needed to get stronger by himself to survive in this dangerous land. However, the levels of all the monsters in the demon god's territory were high. It wasn't an unexplored region for nothing. Humans had pushed exploring this area aside because they would have to endure a considerable amount of losses if they were to enter it. Therefore, he had to search for prey that was suited for him. To become even a bit stronger. It was the first problem Muyong had to solve. Chapter 53, The Outlaw, 2. The next day. As the day brightened, the fire tars started their mass migration. Their ability to carry out actions was outstanding. However, Augur remained. You are our tribe's savior. I can't send you away like this. A monster of huge flames. He spoke as he smiled mischievously. There has always been someone to mentor a young fire tar. But, I never mentored anyone before. You should be honored to have this chance. Coach? I don't need one. You just need to tell me the location where I can find some prey. Muyong was cold towards him. If someone with a large presence like Augur followed him around, even prey that would usually approach him would run away. However, Augur explained how useful he was as if Muyong misunderstood. Are you sure? We fire tars control fire. Fire is a basic element and is essential to living creatures. With me there, you will improve twice as fast. Are you saying that there is a fire tar's method of training? You could say it like that. They had their own method of training? There really wasn't much known about the fire tars. Even though the fire tars were high-ranked monsters, even the top-ranked monsters would try to avoid them as they had the tendency to move in groups. There weren't any groups that would recklessly attack a group of fire tars. Even when humans moved in large groups, they would avoid and go around fire tars' territory, as fire tars wouldn't attack first as long as they didn't bother them or enter their territory. It's getting interesting. Augur was full of confidence. He really didn't seem like he was lying. Okay. I allow you to. Allow me. Augur stuttered as he was dumbfounded. He couldn't be blamed. Would he, the vice chieftain, the second in command, have ever been treated this way? Even the elders couldn't act like this to him. However, the goblin in front of him was his tribe's, the fire tars' savior. The fire tars would be free from their chronic problem if the method of using natural predators spread. There would be no need for useless wars to steal or to take away a plum tree. This one goblin saved tens of thousands of fire tars. Therefore, the goblin in front of him had the right to speak bluntly like that. Damn goblin! If it was some other fire tar or another goblin, the vice chieftain wouldn't have left him alive. He would have ripped his mouth and stepped on him like a bug. However, Augur suppressed his anger. His honor as a fire tar would weep if he went back on his words. Ahem, follow me. There is an opponent right for you. No wild beast approached them as Muyong walked with Augur. Even in the territory of the darkness, the fire tar's existence was one of a kind. Over there, on top of the hill, there is a nest of a blue-horned lizard. Catch it and bring me its heart. Augur stretched his arm to point to a high cliff. In the middle of the cliff, there was a huge nest. Augur crossed his arms. As if he wasn't going to help him any further. Muyong nodded as moved forward. It's a bit tough, but I can handle it. Shaya. At that moment the huge lizard lifted its body from its nest and looked towards Muyong's direction. It ferociously glared at Muyong as if it was going to consider him as an enemy if he approached any further. A blue-skinned lizard with two horns stuck deep inside its skull. It has frost breath. Strength 80-120, Agility 95-135, Stamina 80-100. Intelligence 50-70, Wisdom 50-70. There could be a margin of error depending on the individual. It was the normal stats for an adult blue-horned lizard. Of course, there were some that exceeded that, but normally their stats were within that range. If he compared his current stats to it, it was worth a try. It would have been a bit easier if he used his undead, but he wasn't planning to. After all, this hunt was made himself get stronger. Swish! Muyong took out Anguish and entered the territory of the lizard. Shaya! Immediately, the blue lizard left its nest and quickly charged towards Muyong as if it was sliding. Cold air spewed out from its open mouth. Hey up! Muyong held his breath as his body disappeared in a blink of an eye. At the same time, he appeared behind the lizard. Shadow teleportation. The usable effect of the shadow armor. The effects that allowed the user to teleport to a shadow within their vision 3 times a day was activated. However, the lizard had great senses. Instantly, it turned its body and swung its horns at Muyong. Clash! Muyong barely blocked its attack, but his hands were trembling fiercely. Muyong clenched his teeth as he rushed in again. Its left side is its weak point. The lizard was slightly limping its left leg. If you didn't look carefully, you would have missed it, but Muyong was able to notice it. He constantly turned towards its left and continued to look for an opening. Like this, he struggled for 3 hours playing cat and mouse. Stab! Anguish sliced into the lizard's body. Afterwards, he took out the heart and returned to Augur. Augur looked at Muyong as if it was very unexpected. It seemed like you struggled quite a bit for a goblin who passed the 18th wave. Muyong didn't bother replying. Considering the nature of warriors, the vice chieftain might be disappointed if he knew that Muyong controlled dead corpses. It wasn't something Muyong needed to try and explain if it wasn't necessary. Either way, eat that heart. And turn around and sit down. You want me to just eat this? Yes. You need to chew it and eat it raw. The blue-horned lizard's heart was big. It was the size of Myung's head. To eat this. Even if it was the underworld, if he was a normal human, he would have freaked out. However, Myung took a bite out of the heart as if there was nothing unusual about it. Crunch! Blood spread inside his mouth. It's cold. Perhaps it was because it was a lizard that used frost, or maybe it was because it was a monster with low body temperature, but its blood was really cold. As he slowly chewed it, Augur was surprised. You eat well even though it doesn't look or taste good. It's a food even fire tar warriors won't eat. This is nothing. The lizard's heart tasted horrible. However, Myung could eat and gulp down anything that was edible, whatever it was. He didn't put much importance on how the food tasted, since he didn't know the delight of eating. Chomp! Chomp! After eating all of it, including the last sinew, Myung turned around and sat down. Augur placed his hand on Myung's back with a disgusted expression. Close your eyes and calmly accept the flame. Slowly, it will balance out your unbalanced body. It's going to be painful, but you mustn't open your mouth. Balance. Although Myung didn't know what the vice chieftain was going to do, he just closed his eyes like he was told. Blaze. Soon, a small flame started to spread from Myung's back. The flames entered the back of his body and helped the heart of the lizard find its place inside his body. A different kind of energy stirred up inside his body. Augur's flames removed the impurities in his body. However, the pain was so great that it even made Myung flinch. He didn't spit out a word as he tightly clenched his teeth as if they were going to crumble apart. How many hours passed? It's done. Augur got up as he wiped his brows. Amazing. Even 9 out of 10 warriors normally groan. Didn't you say that I can't? You're right. If you breathe out, the good energy will leave your body. Balancing a body can only be done once or twice in a lifetime. If you groan out loud, the balance will be slightly off. Say that first. Myung spoke with a pale face. He never thought that the vice chieftain would tell him the most important information after everything had ended. It's more valuable when you attain it yourself. Augur rotated his shoulders as if it was nothing. And then opened his mouth to speak. Rest for today and tomorrow we will work on the next part. Is there still more to do? There is about 2 more things to do. After you finish these, you will notice how much you have changed yourself. Myung flopped down onto the ground. With a completely exhausted face, his whole body felt weak. The next day, Myung hunted the typhoon stingrays that flew in the sky. As he tried to eat the heart he finally managed to get, Augur stopped him. You can't just eat the heart of a typhoon stingray. You need other ingredients. What are the ingredients that I need? Sinful poisonous mushroom, 5 ptomaine stringy snakes and 1 frog of despair. Myung wrinkled his expression as he heard the ingredients. Are you trying to assassinate someone? They were all extremely poisonous. They were living creatures that were so poisonous that they could instantly kill an elephant if it ate one. If he ate a mixture of them, his body would become all mushy and melt away. Augur pondered as he understood Myung's thoughts. We fire tars do it like this. However, if it's a goblin, you could die, I guess. If you want, I can reduce the amount of ingredients. No, it's okay. Let's just do it. Myung shook his head. Of course, there was a physical difference between Myung and fire tars, but he could control some of poison to a certain degree himself. I recently figured out that the spirits of the 6 paths like poison. To be exact, they liked objects of yin energy like poison, but it was possible to cover the spirits with poison and launch an attack as long as he had enough of it. Like how the fire tars would burn poison, the spirits Myung had could take some of the poison away. He thought it was well worth a try. Don't regret it. Myung slightly laughed as he gathered the ingredients. After mixing all the ingredients together, there was only one step left. Lastly, we fire tars include the essence of the fire tar tribe. There are different ranks of essences as well, but since you're our savior, I will use the high rank essence for you. He took out a small bottle as if he was being generous. Then, he poured in the unidentified essence into the bin which contained the other ingredients. You need to brace yourself, since you will die if you lose consciousness. This was something Muyong would do with his life on the line. Muyong nodded as he sat on the hot desert ground. Gulp. Gulp. Then he gulped down all the ingredients. At the same time, Muyong's whole body became pale and emitted a purple light. The most poisonous out of the most poisonous. They were very rare poisons that could only be gathered in a demon god's territory. It would have taken Muyong years to even collect these if he didn't have the help of Augur, who knew the locations of every poison. However, they were too strong. Augur was adjusting with his flames, but it wasn't enough. It was a relief that his mushy body didn't instantly melt down. 6 paths. A bit of time was enough. Afterwards, the spirits started to roam around Muyong's body. Almost as if they were devouring a delicious meal, they sucked massive amounts of poison. Poison shade? A shade was a physical form of a normal spirit. It seemed like it threw away its original shape as it sucked in an enormous amount of dangerous poison. However, he couldn't continue his thoughts any longer. That wasn't the end. Muyong's body continued to bloat up and sink down repeatedly. Ugh! It was too painful to endure. Something strange was happening inside his body. The impurities that couldn't be burned up were being eaten by the poison. Afterwards, his body started to reconstruct itself at a cellular level. Metamorphosis. The phenomenon where bones and structures changed completely. They say that you would normally go through this when you overcame your limits. Muyong was in the process of metamorphosing without overcoming his limits. He tried his best to not lose consciousness. Then, after his body had been emptied out, a new wave filled Muyong's body up. Soon, a peony-shaped light bundle shining brilliantly in various colors appeared on Muyong's forehead. Augur, who saw this, widened his eyes. The flower of glory. The flower that only bloomed in only 1 in 1,000 fire tars was on the goblin's forehead. How could he not be surprised? The light bundle fully bloomed, then penetrated inside Muyong's body. Thump! Everything was progressing and Muyong lost his consciousness. Augur looked at Muyong with a complex expression. Ha! This bastard wasn't a goblin. And as if he had received a blow, he laughed vigorously. Chapter 54. Sizzle, sizzle. He heard something boiling. Muyong slowly opened his eyes. His face scrunched up as soon as he found out where he was. He didn't know how long it had been, but he was lying naked in a tub. Different varieties of medicinal herbs were floating on the water. What was more, it seemed like they were out of the ordinary, as there were even some herbs Muyong had never seen before. You've opened your eyes. Just stay still. This is the only way to provide warmth to your newly born body. Blip, blop. Late in the evening, Augur sat next to the tub as he put in small amounts of green powder into the water. You should know you're blessed. I don't even take care of mighty warriors like this. Do you know how rare this unicorn horn powder is? You're using it to warm my body up. Muyong couldn't help but be a bit surprised. Unicorn horns were first-class materials. It was a treasure that permanently increased the grade of whatever it was used on by a level or higher. Augur had made it into a powder and was pouring it into the tub. He spoke as if it was nothing. You just need to know that we fire tars definitely pay back our debts. The chieftain has allowed me to use this powder, so you shouldn't experience any side effects. Side effects? We forcefully balanced your body. The body is an amazing thing, as it always tries to go back to its previous form no matter how bad it was. Normally, to maintain the balance that's been set in place, you need to live at least half of a year in distress. I guess you're saying I'm fine now. The unicorn horn powder produced the highest healing ability, as it has the power to correct the dislocation. Augur explained in a very calm tone. Muyong ruminated his words for a moment before he lifted his hand up. He nodded as he looked around his body. It feels light. His whole body felt lighter. It was the first time he experienced this kind of feeling. He thought he could understand what it meant for someone to be born again. My whole body is completely changed. This is incomparable to the past. Muyong became more surprised as he checked his own body. It was as if a rock had turned into a sponge. Of course, he had to move to be sure, but he expected his growth potential to be completely different. He instinctively felt this way. That he could become stronger faster. He could reach higher peaks. It said the first stage of metamorphosis was complete. It wasn't like he didn't experience something like this in the past. However, the timing was very early and the content was completely different. Traditionally, it was told that you needed to finish fifth stage of metamorphosis to become a transcendent being. In the past, Muyong had finished 4 stages of metamorphosis. However, the transformation that he finished didn't seem like a normal metamorphosis. Magic resistance has increased by 30. There is a strong feeling that I have changed from before. In a normal transformation, the stats didn't increase. Only the growth potential increased. However, magic resistance had increased by 30. His mind felt much clearer as well. But, which part of you is true? A voice cleared his thoughts. Before he noticed, Augur was looking straight at Muyong's face. Perhaps? Muyong lowered his head and looked at his own reflection. However, nothing really changed in his appearance. His white hair and goblin horn were still there. What's your meaning in asking? If you're trying to hide it, I won't ask any further. You really are a rare breed. Even the fact that you neutralized a far greater dose of poison than you could handle. Augur looked at Muyong as if he was looking at a rare animal in a zoo. Muyong moved the poison using spirits, but Augur didn't seem like he noticed it. Unlike the other fire tars, I am quite lenient. But, if you're going to hide it, you must do it well. Because you cannot guarantee that others are going to be as lenient as me. Augur got up as he stretched his back after he told Muyong a riddling advice. In the morning, you will naturally be able to get up. This location is close to where we moved our tribe, so there shouldn't be any monsters attacking. Gibberish. However, Muyong's expression hardened. He wasn't certain, but he had a notion of what Augur was talking about. There's a possibility that he found out that I am a human. He couldn't say that there was no possibility at all. Muyong's appearance might have been revealed during the process of metamorphosis. Augur smiled as he turned around. As Muyong saw him, he spoke. Are you leaving? I have done everything I need. Also. As if he suddenly thought of something, Augur turned his head and spoke. I have recently heard from goblins that a group of humans was roaming around here. It doesn't seem bad for you to look into it. He tossed Muyong information as if he was being generous. He figured out. By now, Muyong was certain that Augur knew Muyong was a human. It seemed like he was telling him to return to the group of humans. As this was a demon god's territory where humans weren't allowed to enter. But, Muyong could see how generous Augur was being by letting him go. It was the most kindness Augur could offer Muyong. It wouldn't have been weird if a fire tar became furious for tricking him. Muyong could only acknowledge that this monster was better than humans in certain ways. Let's meet again. Wahaha. It might be better to not see each other again. But, if we ever do meet again, that time make sure you know what you are. Augur left after he laughed refreshingly. For a while, Muyong looked at his reflection in the water. He regained his vitality as morning arrived. Muyong got out of the tub and changed his clothes. Afterwards, he thought over what Augur had said to him yesterday. Humans are in the demon god's territory. Are they wanderers? There were occasionally people who walked the path of a wanderer after they escaped the great city. People who could no longer stand the cruelty of humans, or some who had to live in hiding because they committed a sin. It was most likely they were the latter, but Myung was still curious about the wanderers in the demon god's territory. Even the people who run away don't run away to a demon god's territory unless they committed a capital offense. It could be a guild who entered to gain something from here. He quietly rubbed his chin. Myung even considered the fact that they might have information that Myung wasn't aware of. Or they were after the same thing as Myung. Whatever the reason was, Myung was interested. However, he didn't know their specific location. The goblins did testify, but they could be lying, or the humans might have left already. If they are nearby, I will meet them one day. First, he needed to hunt. He thought of a few places he had seen when he was wandering around with Augur. There was a perfect hunting place for Myung. Myung slowly walked, sweeping the ground. Fossa. A predator of the rugged wilderness. It was a cat-like monster with such a high agility that it was very difficult to detect with your eyes. However, if you could just detect it, it wasn't a hard opponent to fight against. Myung's eyes were easily able to locate them. With his incredible eyesight and his ability to predict its movements, Myung was able to easily capture a fossa. Grrrl. Kaaaa. However, the fossa was with 4 others. Poison shade. 33 shadows popped out of Myung's body. Shadows would attach onto the bodies of the fossi and release a poison. The fossi started to die as their bodies were turning into green lights. The fossi noticed the change in their bodies, attacked more violently. It was because they realized that if they didn't kill Myung that they would die. However, Myung's eyes, which looked at the charging fossi, were the same as a hunter. Swoosh. He unsheathed anguish. Slayosh. The massacre had started. Myung wiped his brows and drank water. Some are still following me. It was already 15th day since he parted with Augur. He continued to have bloody battles in the demon god's territory. During the process, he faced a pack of fossi, and they have been chasing him for the past 3 days. Although he killed more than 20 of them, he still had more than 100 left. Myung was slipping past their tight blockade as he reduced their numbers. The fossi would probably be incredibly pissed right now. My stats are continuously improving as I hunt. Myung looked at his status viewer as he rested his tiresome body. Within just 15 days, his stats rose steeply. It was an amount that would have taken him at least 1 or 2 months. If he continued on like this, it seemed like he would be able to accomplish his goals in achieving a 100 on all his basic stats. The problem was, I need to get rid of the fossi that are following me. Fossi were very fast. They specialized in group hunts. They were even good at quickly running away. Even though Myung was alert even while he slept, he wasn't used to being publicly chased like this. It took him about an hour to kill 4 fossi. He was able to win as he created lots of wounds and used the poison shades to spread poison through their wounds. Myung would have been out of options if he loosened his guard and was surrounded by over 100 fossi. He tried erasing his markings, but the fossi were able to find Myung's location like a ghost. I kill them or get killed by them. It was a chase that would have only ended when one of the two was satisfied. It was fortunate that he wasn't giving them any openings. The fossi wouldn't be able to carelessly attack him as they also had their guard up against him. If this delicate barrier was to break, a full-scale bloody battle would begin. Help me. The guard that he had continuously placed on for the last 3 days was broken due to the intrusion of a person. An almost naked woman was being chased by about 10 very excited fossi. The woman only had a piece of cloth over her body. She seemed young but was very lean and had scars all over her body. The fossi lost their guard. I have no choice but to fight. The barrier between the pack of fossi and Myung was being maintained very risky. The fossi didn't easily attack him because they knew how great Myung's skills were. If they attacked him with their lives, the fight would have been over already. Fossi were monsters that were that cautious. However, they were excited when the woman barged in. To the point, they were willing to just enter the area Myung was in. If this was true, then he couldn't just send them away. If those 10 Fosse lived, instantly more than 100 Fosse would approach. It would be your end if you ever took a monster in this world lightly. It would have been reckless for Muyong to handle 10 Fosse alone. Muyong could only summon his undead. For now, it was the best way. The blazing spear soldier, the sorceress of lightning and the black sun warrior were summoned. It might not be a good thing to summon a lot of undead to deal with the Fosse. Kill the wild cats. Muyong made a simple command. And together they went to fight them. A woman who was approaching him on the other side widened her eyes in shock. She thought he was a human but found that he had a horn was on his forehead. Ah! Like a marionette with its strings cut off, she fell to her knees as she found out he was also a monster. How stupid of her to ask a monster for help. Her last bit of hope disappeared as monsters approached from both sides. The woman closed her eyes. Kai-a-a-a. Clang. Clash. Huge explosive sounds erupted around her. However, her body was fine. She felt weird, so she opened her eyes only to see the Fosse and the goblin fight each other. I will get eaten after the fight. It was a splendor even those who were vigilant couldn't follow. But it was certain that the goblin was winning against the Fosse. She thought of running away while they were busy but soon realized it was useless. She was destined to die as she entered the territory of the Fosse and the goblin. She just blankly watched the fight with a resigned look on her face. He isn't a normal goblin. He was much stronger than most goblins. The woman's expression became gloomier. The fight ended after 30 minutes. It resulted in the goblin's victory. The goblin who was scratched by the claws of the Fosse approached the woman and spoke with impatience. Who are you? Chapter 55. The woman tightly bit her lips. Goblins like to tease their prey. They would never simply kill their prey. Instead, it might be better to bite her tongue and die now. But, she didn't have the courage. "PL, please don't come closer." Those words were all she could mutter. The scrawny woman took out a marble from her bosom. The marble was cut in half. It was emitting a purple light and a hidden power could be felt. Muyong, who saw that half, opened his eyes as if it was unexpected. Marble of territory. He finally seemed to understand how she came all the way here after going past the pack of Fosse. Honestly, he was half doubtful. The Fosse were currently surrounding from afar and were slowly closing their distance. But, unless someone was quite strong, it was impossible for someone to slip through their blockade and approach Muyong. So he thought it was fishing that wanderers would do, but the story changed if she possessed the marble of territory. It's a tool only pioneers use. The marble of territory was an essential item that would be used to create a village or set up a city. Those that were known as pioneers would use this item when setting up an area inside an unexplored territory. It prevented low-ranked monsters from approaching and created a land that humans could live on. The foundation for erecting all cities began by using this marble. Because she had an item like that, he understood why the Fosse didn't easily approach her. Muyong stretched his hand. And he grabbed the marble of territory. How could a goblin? The woman was shocked. It wasn't possible for a monster to personally touch the marble of territory. It might have been possible if the monster was a high rank or a top rank, but wasn't he a goblin? Of course, Muyong wasn't a goblin. So there was nothing wrong with grabbing the marble of territory, but for the lady who didn't know that, she couldn't help but misunderstand. Is there a village near here? Village, there is something similar. She gulped down her saliva and replied. It meant there was a gathering of people. Muyong grinned before saying. So you successfully entered the demon god's territory. Who are you? Are you really a goblin? The woman asked as if she was grasping at straws. Although the goblin in front of her looked vicious, she didn't feel any hostility from him. And there was nothing she could do besides believe. Muyong briefly looked at the woman's eyes. The woman's body curled up. He slowly stretched his hand and touched the naked woman's body. Her body would flinch at his touch, but she was already as weak as she could be, so she was unable to resist. Traces of abuse. However, Myung didn't care about the woman's feelings. And he was quite a distance away from feeling sexual desire. Only, he was slightly interested in the wounds on her body. "So you escaped from your village?" he said with certainty. These injuries could only be created from abuse. Although he didn't know who that person was, he knew that whoever he was very viscous. So she eventually couldn't take it any longer and escaped and stole the marble of territory along with her. As if he had hit the mark, the woman sat down hugging her knees. "Where is the village?" Over there." She pointed her finger eastwards. It was the direction Myung was moving towards while avoiding the pack of Fosse. "I have to change my direction." It was actually better. If he didn't meet the woman, things would have gotten more difficult. He was already in a situation where he was having difficulties just dealing with the Fosse. He wanted to worry about other problems after getting rid of the tenacious Fosse. "Kaya!" The Fosse cried from afar. They had discovered the deaths of their companions. Myung thought over the woman's circumstances before coming to a conclusion. "There's a lot I want to ask." First, he would take her with him. "Get on." When he showed her his back, the woman only looked at him with a stiff body. "I won't stop you if you want to die." No. My body is stiff." "1 second." The woman quickly became serious and threw her body over his back. Art of death. Myung reanimated the dead Fosse. Because he was in a rush, the scores were low, but it was enough if they could just gain a bit of time. "Block them." A single command. The Fosse that have turned undead stood in a line. Myung started to move his feet quickly. He moved for half a day. Only then could he escape from the Fosse's blockade. Still, it was for at most 4 hours. They would be followed afterwards, but it was important that he gained some time to rest. After the fire tars moved their village, the territories of other monsters became a mess. Myung sat near a well and clicked his tongue. The reason why the Fosse could be this active was because the fire tars had moved their village. As a mess was created by monsters invading other territories while avoiding the fire tars, the area of activity of the Fosse increased. Fosse are monsters that have an incredible thirst for revenge. "They won't let me go." Myung started to hunt after Augur left. And he was briefly fascinated by his quick growth. His mistake was killing the Fosse cubs he came across coincidentally. Afterwards, he was hunted by the Fosse. This continued for over 3 days. "I can't keep going south. I have to reduce their numbers somehow." He didn't have detailed information about this area. It was suicidal to go down recklessly. Tap. Tap. Myung tapped his knees with his fingers. Then he grabbed a branch and drew a line on the ground. The Fosse's blockade, he drew the path and the location of the approaching pack. "What are you drawing?" Myung slightly lifted his head. The naked woman approached after washing herself in the water. A bold appearance unlike her first impression. It meant she was certain that Myung wouldn't kill her. "Away." So. We are being chased by the Fosse." "That's right." There wasn't really a reason to hide it. The woman gently smiled. "Then let's combine our strength. I am also being chased." He already expected that. The hunting party would have probably been formed by now. However, Myung was cold. "You have to be helpful for us to even combine our strengths. I know the paths in this area. So help me leave the demon god's territory. And we will naturally be able to get rid of the Fosse as well." Impossible. It didn't matter if she knew the paths, it was impossible to leave the demon god's territory. It would be difficult unless they had multiple lives. As if she anticipated Myung's reply, she gave him the next best plan. "Then ensure my safety. We can't survive on our own anyways." A change in attitude. She was completely different from when she was filled with fear. She tried to reveal her worth as she attempted to negotiate. We can't survive on our own, hey. Myung was secretly speechless. He had experienced situations that were multiple times more severe than this. The current actions of the woman were like holding a candle to the sun. After carrying her and keeping her alive, it seemed that she believed that it would continue. She simply regarded herself too highly. Myung got up from his place. Then he slowly approached the woman and grabbed her neck and lifted her up. I think you're mistaken. We are not equals. The woman would die without Myung, but Myung wouldn't die without her. So how could they be equal? Clench. As he strengthened his grip, the woman's face became pale. Cough, cough. You need to cough up everything you know. So your life can extend by even a second. The woman must have thought that Myung wouldn't kill her, but she must have realized by now that that was a delusion. Although it would become a bit more difficult, it was a situation that he could definitely handle by himself. It was good to be bold, but that was still something they had to show depending on the situation. If you understand, nod your head. I under. Please. Thud. As soon as he loosened his grip, the woman collapsed on the ground and breathed heavily. Myung unconcernedly asked her questions. You definitely said there was a village. How many people are there, who are in charge, and how is the village run? Cough. 100. The one known as Heidegger kidnapped people and created a territory. He treats everyone like slaves. Her strong will disappeared. She had become a rabbit stricken with fear. She had understood her position. Myung meditated on her reply. 100 people. It was more than he expected. What was more, Myung knew the name that came out of the woman's mouth. The outlaw Heidegger. Tha, that's right. How did you know? The woman was frightened. Her expression asked how a goblin could possibly know that name. Myung frowned. The outlaw Heidegger. He never imagined he would hear his name here. He was definitely evil and was not bound to human standards. Because of his cruel and wicked personality, there was even a time when he was chased by all the guilds and clans. The word great villain really suited him. Anyways, how was he currently within the demon god's territory? I never heard that they found any signs of humans here. That meant, Heidegger's new plan failed. Or he moved after succeeding. However, he couldn't understand just why he would set up an area in a place crawling with monsters. Heidegger became notorious after the Great Calamity started. There wasn't much information about him before then. But, Heidegger liked to complete weird trials. There was a high chance that his actions had something to do with a trial. There's something here. He's not the type of bastard who moves without certainty. A trial that required him to kidnap more than 100 people and even enter a demon god's territory. His mouth watered. There were many things still unknown about Heidegger after becoming notorious. As he had suddenly appeared and disappeared. There were rumors that he was killed by a demon god or died in a trial, but that was it. They were all only rumors. However, Heidegger was a figure that was chased down by all the large groups. He had that much power. And the origin of his power could be from this place. Myung organized his thoughts and said. Do you know what Heidegger is trying to do? There are words that it has something to do with ancient ruins. Besides that, I don't know. Even if she said ruins, there were many types. Anyways, it was definitely something to covet. This time, he changed his question. How many hunters do you think will chase you? Hunt, ours. I'm talking about Heidegger's companions that are going to chase you. She thought for a moment before opening her mouth. 13. If they don't have the marble of territory, they aren't able to declare their territory. Everyone should be coming after me. She was definitely more obedient. Although she was still somewhat stricken with fear, it was better than taking the lead and getting dragged down. 13 people and Heidegger. It's enough. Myung nodded his head. We need to lure them in and make them fight with the Fosse. Sorry? That's dangerous. I did not ask you for your opinion. It was an announcement. And this was the optimal method to survival. The woman who only thought to run trembled her body. It was easy to say that he would lure them in and make them fight, but it was like walking a dangerous tightrope. However, Muyong was stubborn. If you want to live, draw a line. The best location for them to fight each other. He handed her the branch. The outlaw Heidegger. He was a highly notorious villain among villains. But Muyong was the same as him in terms viciousness. They would know who the real outlaw was once they fought. Chapter 56. Muyong took out anguish and a talisman. Ogre's strength. It was one of the rewards he received from stopping the 18th wave in the endless battlefield. He placed it aside as he didn't need it at the time, but going forwards, it would be an all-out war. The pack of Fosse and the outlaw Heidegger were both opponents he couldn't take lightly. He now had no choice but to use the talisman for an immediate increase in military force. I need to be careful when I strengthen an equipment. Not everything was good when strengthened. Strengthening via a talisman could lead to a loss if he didn't use it properly. There was definitely a possibility that a bad characteristic could be upgraded or the durability could be decreased. Muyong carefully looked at his talisman. Soon, information about it popped. Name, Ogre's Strength. Rank, A. Classification, Single Use. Effect, A Talisman with Ogre's Strength. Asterisk Equipment Strengthening. Asterisk Strength 510 Increase. Asterisk A characteristic of an ogre is randomly revealed. There was a chance it would receive a random characteristic. There was also another problem. Which equipment to use it on? There were equipment that had better compatibility with a strengthening talisman. And there was a good chance the equipment would influence the characteristic. Anguish. And Muyong chose anguish. He thought the only equipment optimal for the ogre's strength talisman was anguish, even though a lot of the durability was used up and it was unrepairable. From the start, anguish was the only one that increased his strength. It showed how much it leaned towards strength. It was the same thing with the ogre's strength talisman. Also, no other equipment was more destructive than a weapon. Muyong placed the ogre's strength talisman on anguish. As he battered the talisman against anguish, it was absorbed into anguish. Anguish was lifted from his hand. The color of anguish slowly changed. No, you could say it became a shade darker. It was to the point where he didn't believe it could get any darker. Muyong clenched his fists. There was no way for him to be always right. Although it did say the compatibility was great, it might have strengthened something unexpected. With a slight tension, shortly after the transformation of anguish was complete. A short message. He immediately grabbed anguish that was dropping to the ground. Name, anguish. Rank, A+. Classification, A keepable type. Durability, 16,344, unrepairable. Effect, Star of David, a sword given to a person who had completed the trial of Gremory. Asterisk strength +5. Asterisk ability to steal blood from the opponent and recover the stamina of the user. Asterisk strength +9. Asterisk ogre's cruelty, as you kill more enemies, the strength increases slightly. Active for 30 minutes. Clench. He clenched his fists. The results were better than what he imagined. Strength +9. It was at most 10, but there barely was a time 10 was achieved. It wasn't just a problem of chance. If you strengthen it 100 times, maybe it will result in a single maximum increase. You could say it was an amazing result to get 9, and above all, its rank increased. Although only a plus sign was added, this showed the class of the equipment. It was divided into 3 different types: plus meant rare, plus meant unique, and plus meant epic. Even if only one was added, it was an excellent improvement. What was more, these kinds of improvements were almost non-existent A rank and above. Even the characteristic wasn't bad. Like the word states, it's very ogre-like. The more he killed the better. He understood why it was very compatible with Anguish. As Anguish had the basic ability to steal blood from its victim to recover the stamina of its user, both improved each other's effectiveness. Myung held Anguish. It felt much smoother in the hand than before. Let's begin. He walked slowly. His footsteps felt a little lighter than before. He entered the Fosse's blockade. Some could ask if he was going in to die, but Myung had a plan of his own. Black Sun Warrior, go to the other side and find the people who move in a group. Attack them and lure them to the designated location. The Death Warrior in full armor started to move right away. If it was the Black Sun Warrior, he wouldn't be damaged by most attacks. As he was not only strong but also swift, there was no better bait than him. Face-to-face combat was forbidden as Myung didn't know how strong the current Heidegger was. Myung turned his head after the Black Sun Warrior left. He took out a talisman. The spirit of the Fossa. Like how he enchanted talismans from killing the shrew mice, the same thing was possible with the Fosse. However, it was rare for the talismans to appear, unlike the time with the shrew mice. They were monsters on a different level. Hundreds of shrew mice wouldn't be able to do anything against a Fossa. This was the one talisman he was able to get until now. It's impossible to trick all the Fosse with this one talisman, but I should be able to do it. Myung had already experienced becoming part of the ground, the wind, and a weak living creature. Imitating them should be simple if he could just detect them and use the spirit of the Fossa. Rib. Myung ripped the talisman. At the same time, his senses were enhanced as they became more alert. He erased his scent by rubbing the blood of a dead Fossa over his body and matched his heartbeat to that of a Fossa after recalling their movements. He closed his eyes and slowly remembered each detail. He needed to believe that he wasn't a human to trick the Fosse. Kai-ah. Kai-ah. The Fosse that formed the blockade ran towards him. The few Fosse that came very close to him smelled him with their noses. They raised their ears to listen, then played around as they tapped him. However, Myung didn't move. Kai-ah. In time, the Fosse could only be confused. There was definitely a prey here, but it disappeared into thin air. They recognized Myung as part of their pack. I can't maintain this for long. Myung placed his hands on the floor. He moved on all fours and hung around with the Fosse for a while. However, the duration wasn't long. At most, an hour. He didn't really use it until now, as it was impossible to completely lose the Fosse within that time. An hour. He needed to accomplish what he wanted within that time. Myung quickly scanned the pack. There they are. His eyes flashed as soon as he saw the Fossa cubs. Asterisk. Heidegger. A bushy beard and a wide-brimmed hat. His figure as he walked on the wasteland resembled a typical outlaw from the West. About a dozen subordinates were following behind him. Chief, didn't we come in too deep? A nearby subordinate asked. However, Heidegger grated his teeth and scrunched up his face. I don't know why, but the territories of the monsters have been rearranged. It's fine right now. Rather. Alex. Where did you say that bitch was? A man named Alex answered while he held half of the marble of territory. If we go this way, it's the direction of the crater. Crater? Is she trying to fall down and kill herself? Isn't it possible that she is trying to get rid of the marble by going there? Slap. Heidegger slapped his forehead. Unless that bitch is crazy. When he went out for a bit, a crazy woman took half of the marble and ran. It happened as one of his subordinates fell asleep while guarding the marble. He killed that subordinate out of anger, but he didn't regret it. It became troublesome to find the marble of territory. Either way, he was nervous. His rule was perfect. He allowed them to fully experience the terror of a superhuman with military strength. Unless they were crazy, how could they possibly decide to run away? He kidnapped 100 weaklings from a city and took them to a demon god's territory. He killed all those who resisted along the way. As no one would really care about the deaths of a few weaklings. That was how Heidegger built his own castle. The surviving slaves faithfully carried out his orders. I was almost there. Heidegger clenched his fist tightly. Soon, he could have proclaimed this territory as his. He needed a special symbol that suited him if he wanted to proclaim a territory as his with the marble of territory. In other words, like the Sky Library in the great city, he needed something that would be the center of his city. As there was no way something like that would exist in a demon god's territory, he had to make one himself. And it was almost complete. He never thought a crazy woman would appear and take it away when he was about to complete it. If you lost the marble, I won't let you die easily. I will make you regret being alive. Heidegger grated his teeth. How much time had passed since they started to walk? Stomp! Heidegger stopped. Behind him, the rest of his subordinates became quiet. Something's approaching. Is it a monster? It's not a living creature. This feeling, it's an undead. Heidegger was certain. He could feel the strong aura of death. In this situation, it could only be an undead. What? An undead? Did a lich appear from somewhere? Everyone was making a fuss. Liches were monsters that were as strong as the fire tars but harder to fight against. The ones they deemed as an enemy were annihilated using few thousands of undead. A story about a lich being an equal match against a decent-sized army didn't exist for no reason. If they got caught? Of course, they wouldn't survive. Even if Heidegger was there, it would have been the same. Not a lich. Much weaker than a lich. However, Heidegger shook his head. He was able to instinctively classify things that were stronger or weaker than him. That was how he was able to survive for such a long time while committing all sorts of crimes. And from what he could sense, the undead was strong for an undead but still weaker than him. However, he needed to be careful. He felt this was fishy from some odd reason. If it passed by, maybe, but it was approaching them as if it was aiming for Heidegger from the start. Raise your weapons. It's coming this way. From afar, an undead wearing black armor appeared. A death warrior. The undead charged at Heidegger the moment he came to sight. He had black wings on his back and was holding a black sword. He had never seen a death warrior that looked like that. However, they would inevitably clash. Clash. Heidegger held a sword in both hands. Myung lured and kidnapped a fossa cub. And changed his direction towards the crater. You came. The woman shivered as she held the marble of territory as she waited on the top of the crater. It wasn't that big of a crater but it was still active with lava boiling inside. Above it, were monsters the size of humans flying around. Pyroxes aren't combative monsters. You don't need to be afraid. Still. The woman looked towards the crater. Lizards with wings of a bat. These were pyroxes. One of the few peaceful monsters. There wasn't a lot of information about them as they were quite mystic creatures that lived inside craters. From the start, there weren't many either since they were rare. However, as the woman didn't know this, she could only wait for Myung as if her life was on the edge. But, what is that cloth? The woman asked as her gaze turned towards it. Myung was holding something wrapped with a cloth. As if it wasn't anything unusual he casually replied. It's Fosse's cub. What? What would you do if Fosse came because of it? The woman was terrified. The Fosse cherished their cubs. The whole pack will attack if you touched one of them. I brought it because of that reason. Myung also knew that very well. Wasn't he unintentionally engaged in a chase because of it? However, this time, he was planning to use the Fosse's revengefulness. They are coming. He was able to sense the Black Sun warrior approaching. Although it was quite a large distance away, it was like something similar to the authority of the Death Lord. Myung opened up the cloth. Kaya. A newborn cub the size of his wrist cried out loud. Myung took out anguish. Wait! As the woman screamed, anguish quickly moved. Slash. Chapter 57. He sliced off the fossa cub's neck. It all happened in a blink of an eye. Myung was unwavering. His movements were natural, as if doing this was obvious. The relationship between Myung and the Fosse was already past the point of reconciliation. He couldn't leave any seedlings if he wanted this war to end. Myung placed the head and body into a sack. The woman blankly looked at the scene like an outsider. Brrrr. He's crazy. She shuddered. The Fosse moved in packs while everyone took care of the young. It was like they were all parents. What was more, if a cub was within tens of kilometers, they would be able to find it. As the thick scent of blood had spread, the pack of Fosse should be on their way to the crater. He acted this way even though he knew the consequences. Actions without a hint of hesitation. Did he have multiple lives? As if he didn't care, Myung summoned the Sorceress of Lightning. Sorceress of Lightning, protect the sack and the woman. Nod. The Sorceress of Lightning, who had the appearance of a girl, nodded. She had incredible defending abilities. It wouldn't be easy for anyone to pass through an oncoming lightning storm. She could definitely buy enough time. How can a goblin use an undead? The woman who silently looked at the scene asked. Goblins were races who used natural forces. They specialized in controlling fires and water. On the other hand, the undead were monsters that went against the natural forces. The living dead. It was definitely quite a distance away from the powers a goblin could handle. However, the goblin in front of her. I don't understand. The woman inwardly shook her head. Although they were on the same boat, she had never heard of a goblin like him existing. Even if she would occasionally hear rumors about an exceptional goblin king, it was unimaginable for a goblin to control the undead. Keep holding the marble, so that all who come can see it. Myung didn't reply to the woman's question. He didn't care about what others thought of him. The woman's eyebrows twitched when she heard those words. Are you telling me to die? To keep hold of the marble of territory? It would definitely provoke Heidegger. He would definitely kill her first. As expected, Myung didn't reply. Instead, he turned his back. They are coming. They were Heidegger and his companions. The woman scratched her neck. Due to her intense nervousness, she wasn't even able to gulp down her saliva. Her thoughts were complicated. There wasn't a single thing that was normal. It was simply a mess. However, she understood one thing. He's out of his mind. The goblin in front of her had to be crazy. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be taking such risks. Most monsters would try to avoid a Fosse pack. And Heidegger was a veteran who had already lived in the underworld for more than 5 years. Although the people he kidnapped weren't particularly strong, his ability to cross over to a demon god's territory without anyone's knowledge was frightening. No matter how strong the goblin was, it didn't seem like he would be able to handle them both. I'll probably die the moment I try to escape. But the goblin was heartless. It seemed like he had no emotions. He didn't seem like a goblin who would just watch her escape. Like how he killed the Fossa cub, he would kill her without blinking an eye. The woman gathered her courage and asked another question. Goblin, sir, it's strange to keep calling you that, so please tell me your name. My name is Atisha. A human and a goblin exchanging names. It would be a funny scene, but the woman was desperate. If she could relieve a bit of the tension, she wanted to know even the insignificant details of the goblin. To not know anything and to wait was too frightening. At the same time, the woman was finally able to hear a reply. You don't need to know. Heidegger's hair blew in the wind. The Death Warrior's sword barely touched the lines of his throat. Whew! It was close. However, no matter how strong he was a Death Warrior. He couldn't be considered very strong. Heidegger was able to handle it himself. His defense is incredible. The problem was his armor. There wasn't even a dent even after he stabbed and slashed at him. It didn't seem like he would be able to smash the armor with normal weapons. He wasn't created by a lich. There is no way a lich would put this much effort to make a death warrior. He kept his distance as he examined the warrior. The rank of his equipment could widen anyone's eyes. Someone gave that level of equipment to a death warrior? Liches were the lords of the undead. Although there were different levels of liches, they were existences who could create countless numbers of death warriors. On the other hand, creating a top-ranked undead like a death knight was complicated. It was to the point where it was rare for liches to have more than one death knight. Anyways, it was normal to give that level of skills and equipment to at least a high-ranked undead. Unless they were rich one. Quite funny. He smiled slightly before wielding his twin swords. Blaze. Light shot out of the death warrior's back. And for some reason, he started to back away. Are you running away? Tisk. He lightly clicked his tongue. However, his eyes were filled with interest as he looked at the death warrior. As long as a lich wasn't supporting him, it wouldn't matter if he smashed him into bits. With all his strength. The moment he decided that, Heidegger stabbed his heart with his twin swords. Pant. Kriaake. Heidegger dropped his head. And soon after, red tentacles started to crawl out of the wound. To be exact, the things popped out of his heart and wrapped Heidegger's entire body. Hundreds, thousands of tentacles formed to create a strong armor. Heidegger lifted his head. Are you, run away? Why did he transform without telling us? Pang. He smashed the head of the man who spoke. His head exploded like a watermelon and blood splattered everywhere. However, Heidegger, who had killed one of his companions, acted like nothing happened and just frowned. I always think the same thing when I transform, but it really feels disgusting. Crack. Crack. He warmed up. Then he said to his terrified companions. You guys go get the marble of territory from that woman. Leave the undead to me. Yeah, yes. More than 10 men left as if they were running away. Heidegger turned his attention towards the death warrior at a distance. With a disgusting smile plastered on his face. Slam. It took a moment for Heidegger to approach the death warrior and slam him with his fist. The death warrior flew up high before being nailed to the ground. However, the death warrior stood up again like a roly-poly toy. Do you think that armor will be able to block the current me? His smile became even more disgusting. In the underworld, there were no laws. A place for the strong. The world where the strong would survive while the weak would die out. And in this world, Heidegger was known as an outlaw. That just showed how evil the person named Heidegger was. Kidnapping more than 100 people was nothing. Companions? The word companion was comical. They were nothing but expendable items needed only to watch over the slaves. Slam. Slam. Smash. A one-sided beating began. All the death warrior could do was to block. Blackie, look at me now. Am I not beautiful? Self-obsession. Heidegger had something like that. He was very happy with his current self, who had taken off the clothes of a human. A feeling as if he didn't conform to the standards and rules of humanity. A mixture of liberation and excitement which was impossible to explain. Hideous. But, at that moment, somewhere behind him, an unknown man appeared denouncing his current self. A mystery man wearing a red helmet and cape. Who are you? Did you start following my style? Heidegger's body was completely covered in red tentacles. He made a joke because the man showed up covered in red equipment. However, the voice of the other had a flatness to it. Get up. Swoosh. All kinds of undead appeared around them. Even Heidegger's companion, who had his head blown up, got up. Heidegger's expression stiffened. An impossible performance for corpse sorcerers. There was only one monster who could do this. Lich. Myung stared at Heidegger. The Black Sun warrior was not an opponent for Heidegger. Although Myung rapidly became stronger over the 15 days, he was still around the same level as the Black Sun warrior. If all the undead combined strength with Myung, they would have about a 30% chance to win. I am definitely weaker than I was in the past. Heidegger started to gain notoriety after the Great Calamity had started. The power he showed then, while it might not be the top 10, it was definitely top 100 among humans. If he still had the power he had before, the Black Sun warrior would have already been smashed into bits. Because that wasn't the case, he had a 30% chance of winning. Plenty of things could change within 10 years in the underworld. It was obvious he would be incomparably weaker than his past self. This bastard is careful. And knows a lot. That's why he'll mistake me. His thoughts were correct. Heidegger took Myung for a lich. Liches were the leaders of the undead who controlled top-ranked monsters and armies. The people who could fight against a lich by themselves were almost non-existent. There were even stats that claimed it would normally take 50 Knights of Justice buffed with a high-ranked sacred blessing to fight against one lich. On top of that, Myung knew a little bit about Heidegger's personality. Heidegger never took risks. So he wouldn't recklessly rush into this. Why is a lich here? The undead don't roam this place. Heidegger cautiously said as he kept his guard up against the more than 100 undead. If he's under a delusion, then I need to use it. If he fought straight on against him, his probability of winning would go down further. Instead of risking it, he believed using this misunderstanding to his advantage was best. Everything near the crater is my land. You attacked one of my undead here. What? I'm telling you, that bastard attacked me first. Heidegger became frustrated. It was like he was apologizing after getting slapped in the face. Although he was a bit special compared to normal liches, since he could create and control undead, he couldn't find any other conclusions. And because Myung was completely hiding his spirit, Heidegger was unable to tell if he was weak or strong. Honestly, the undead around him weren't very high-ranked. So it was confusing. However, one mistake could be the difference between life or death. I guess it hasn't been long since he founded his own area. The crater was originally a territory that belonged to the Pyroxes. No, it better to call it a hands-off area. It seemed like it hadn't been long since the Lich took over the crater, as it was his first time hearing about there being an owner here. He could understand the low-ranked undead if that was the case. Of course, he couldn't attack. Liches were strong even by themselves. It was becoming more and more of a headache the more he thought about it. Myung said something a step later because he knew this. Pay with your death. Whoa, whoa. Calm down. I don't have any desire to fight you. If you act like you didn't see anything, I will quietly leave, how's that? Heidegger lifted both his hands as if he had no intentions of fighting. His expression showed hurriedness. Heidegger was self-obsessed. So obviously he considered his life more important than anything else. His creed was not to fight fights that he might lose. His viciousness would always be biased towards weaklings. Myung pondered for a moment before raising a single finger. Good. But I will only let one of you survive. Only one. The cats entered my territory. They are going towards the crater. It's an insignificant and annoying task to get rid of each one. So you get rid of them. He talked like he was acting out of kindness. Crater? Ah. Heidegger recalled what his companion told him before. That the person thought the woman went in the direction of the crater. Damn it. An alarm rang out in Heidegger's head. Chapter 58. Fosse were the only cat-type monsters here. He didn't know why the Fosse were running towards the crater, but it probably wasn't for a good reason. If the woman died and he lost the marble? Heidegger's mind raced. If they were going to fight, it was best to get permission from the owners of the territory before they started. If the Lich was okay with them, he was able to easily get rid of the cats. Let's kill the cats. Still, the territory will become a bit noisy. I don't have a lot of patience. Myung's emotionless eyes looked towards Heidegger. As if things would become more difficult as time went on. Heidegger coolly nodded his head as if things were moving smoothly. That's not a problem. A few tens of Fosse are no match for me. Instead, I want you to swear the oath of death. The oath of death. It was the only promise a living being could use to restrain a person who opposed death. It was to prepare for the unlikely possibility. It showed he didn't trust anyone. The oath of death was normally used by corpse sorcerers, but to do this, an item was required. Heidegger naturally took out 2 skull rings from his chest. And he quietly added some words just in case they disturbed the Lich's mood. If you just make the oath for me, then I will get rid of all those cats. Myung laughed inwardly. Being prepared was good. You could say that Heidegger was truly a veteran. As backstabbing happened quite often in the underworld. However, the oath of death ring had no effect. It was because Myung wasn't a dead person from the start. Would Heidegger know that extreme precaution could also lead to more danger? Myung wore the skull ring and spoke appropriately. If you get rid of all the Fosse in my territory, I will spare your life. I will make sure I don't trespass this area after today. Heidegger had no further suspicions and completely believed that this oath was completed. If Heidegger was really a corpse sorcerer, he would have prepared a few more rings to double-check, but he either didn't have the time to do so or he lacked the knowledge. This was his best and the limit to his capabilities. Swoosh! He immediately changed his stance and kicked the ground. Myung was able to feel his urgentness. Heidegger instantly darted past Myung. The tip of Myung's lips slightly lifted up as he looked back at Heidegger. Things are going smoothly. He was planning to slightly urge him as they fought, but he didn't even need to do that. He never thought Heidegger would take out the oath of death ring that corpse sorcerers used, but, either way, Myung wasn't a dead man. And that mistake and off-guardedness would later strangle him. You let your guard down the most when you believe it has ended and you have won. When would be the best moment to assassinate your opponent? When they were starving to death? When they lay on the ground after using all of their strength? None of the above. It is when your opponent believed he had achieved his goal. Heidegger might believe that there were only tens of Fosse, but their numbers were over 100. It wouldn't be an easy fight even for Heidegger. And when he believed everything was over, block the pathways to the crater. Make sure no one leaves alive. The undead spread out. Myung moved by himself. Flutter. Myung became part of the wind as his cape fluttered. Kaya. Fosse were enraged as they saw their dead cub. They showed their teeth and in an instant, they occupied the surroundings. Splot. Zap. Zop. The Fosse didn't even care about the shield of lighting created by Sorceress of Lightning. They kept running straight while they burned their skin and fur. Their sole determination for revenge. The rage they felt because of their cub awakened their fighting instincts. 10 corpses were already lying on the ground. The comrades of Heidegger who arrived slightly before them were slashed to death. You wild cats! Piss off! At that amazing timing, Heidegger appeared. Fosse changed their attention to him. Humans were enemies. It was the same for Heidegger who just appeared. However, Heidegger's eyes were focused on something else than the Fosse. You bitch! His gaze only focused onto the marble of territory the woman was holding. The woman closed her eyes and lifted the marble up high. Heidegger suddenly became hasty. A Fosse scratched Heidegger's body with its sharp claws. Few tentacles were torn, but they quickly regenerated and filled the empty space. Whoosh! Heidegger, who had his knees bent, punched the Fosse's side as it gnawed on him. With the sound of air exploding, a hole was made through Fosse's side. Wait for me! That was when Fosse's target changed. They realized that Heidegger was the strongest human here. Clash! Thump. Clench. Fosse dropped dead with a single punch. However, Fosse weren't afraid of death. This was the reason most monsters avoided them. You could only be astonished as Fosse continued to attack until they all died when they were enraged. On the other hand, Heidegger was alone. He couldn't stop all the Fosse that were attacking from every direction. Gah! You annoying bastards! Heidegger never thought he would lose. Just, the amount of damage was greater than he could regenerate. As the tentacles around him started to get cut off, Heidegger's strength also was greatly reduced. There were some that stuck on him and were biting his neck. However, the final winner was Heidegger. He stood there alone after a whole hour of struggling. The Fosse that numbered over 100 were massacred, but Heidegger wasn't in perfect shape either. Pant, pant. The tentacles no longer regenerated. He lost sight in one of his eyes. However, the most important thing was that he won. And what he searched for was more important than one of his eyes. You fucking bitch! You dare to take what's mine? PL, please, save me. The woman, Atisha, dropped to her knees as she was frightened. The sorceress of lightning who was protecting Atisha disappeared all of a sudden. However, Heidegger, who had lost his rationality, didn't care about her disappearance. Heidegger placed his hand on top of her head. I will bark if you tell me to, I will crawl if you tell me to. Please. Please spare my life. A bitch who stole once can do it again. He slowly placed more strength in his hand. The woman twisted her body, but Heidegger didn't loosen his grip. Blood rushed towards her head. Pop! It exploded. After Heidegger shook off the brain parts from his hand, he picked up the marble of territory as it rolled onto the ground. He completed the marble after taking the other half from his dead comrade. It's good enough that I found it. Heidegger laughed out loud as he looked at the completed marble. Even if he lost all his companions and lost sight in one of his eyes, compared to them, this marble was priceless. I'm gonna be king. An ancient trial he found by coincidence. Heidegger was planning to build a castle here and become the king. This marble was going to be a very important item in building the foundation. Strength of a king. If I could make it mine. He felt thrilled just by thinking about it. Not just an outlaw, but to reign as the king of the outlaws. As he had finished his work, all that was left for him was to return. It was when he loosened up his shoulders. Stab! A sudden blow. He sensed something. However, it was already too late when he did. He barely avoided a critical injury, but he was able to feel his body being pierced through. Yo, you! Heidegger could only be very surprised as he quickly turned around to find out who the opponent was. Lich! I'm not a lich. Myung told him the truth. What? Heidegger was at a loss for words, but Myung didn't even give him a chance to get himself together. Shadow teleportation. The ability that allowed you to teleport to a shadow 3 times a day. This, shitty bastard. Clang. Heidegger smacked away the dagger Myung threw. Heidegger reacted right away as the dagger was thrown high in the air, but Myung was a bit faster. Acceleration. Myung was able to double his speed for 3 seconds as he used Hermes's boots. Heidegger wouldn't be able to block Myung's attacks as he was already exhausted to the full, and even his defensive ability was greatly reduced. Swoosh! At the same time, when Heidegger turned around to aim for Myung, Myung used the shadow teleportation once again. At that moment, Myung teleported to the shadow of the dagger Heidegger smacked away. The shadow of the dagger appeared on Heidegger's head. Myung was able to teleport to any shadow within his vision. Stab! Anguish accurately stabbed his head. The tentacles blocked it, but Myung was able to pierce through all walls of protection as Anguish was already strengthened for quite a lot. Thump! Heidegger's body dropped to the floor with eyes that couldn't still grasp what exactly happened. Myung took off his helmet. After identifying Myung's face, Heidegger's eyes completely widened. You weren't a lich. Slowly, Myung held Heidegger's head as it was drooping down. Do you want to live? Completely emotionless eyes. A swamp. Heidegger was being swallowed by a swamp. Heidegger used his last bit of strength to slowly nod his head. No matter how many people he had killed, he valued his own life. Like I promised, I will let you live. At the same time, a slight bit of hope appeared in Heidegger's eyes. Ah! That was right. What if he isn't a lich? Heidegger still had the oath of death ring. The two definitely made an oath on the ring. That Myung would let him live if he got rid of all the cats, the Fosse. It still wasn't too late. If Myung would just let him survive, Heidegger could live with his fast regenerative abilities. Heidegger hoped and wished for it to happen. There was hope and Myung was the only one who could give it to him. Unfortunately, the oath of death ring didn't work on Myung as he wasn't dead in the first place. Myung took off the ring. He threw it on the floor and stepped on it. And quietly whispered. As an undead. Not really dead or alive, but in the form of an undead. Could you call it alive? But, Heidegger couldn't even refute. Heidegger lost consciousness as he felt his soul being sucked in. Level, 137. Type, Abomination. Strength 140, 131 plus 9, Agility 121, 112 plus 9. Stamina 155, 146 plus 9, Intelligence 109, 100 plus 9. Wisdom 111, 102 plus 9, Magic Resistance 97, 88 plus 9. Plus high level of regeneration. Plus addition stats following heart, werewolf's heart, all stats plus 9. Plus dance of tentacles, a skill to strengthen the muscles is usable. He was much stronger than the Black Sun Warrior, which was his best undead he had made so far. It was an obvious result when you think about how Heidegger overpowered the Black Sun Warrior. There must be a limit as my skill rank is low. However, it was much less of a limit than he had expected. As his Art of Death skill was only AC rank, it seemed like Heidegger's strong powers weren't applied properly. But, this was enough. Even if the Art of Death skill was close to a universal skill, it could be considered as a god's authority if he could just reproduce a strong person to an undead as exactly as he was when he was alive. He didn't know what would happen if he raised his rank further, but he knew he wasn't at that level yet. However, it had to mean something as the Black Sun Warrior was the last undead to receive a score over 80. Above all, where were you planning on using the Marble of Territory? Heidegger opened his one eye after he healed his injuries. King Merdudun's relics. It's buried. Heidegger spoke with a voice that kept cutting off. Myung clenched his fist tightly. As he expected, Heidegger was completing an important trial. The relics of King Merdudun. Ha! It was unexpected. Merdudun was an ancient Murloc king. Even though the Murlocs were weak low-ranked monsters, Merdudun was a very remarkable monster among them. As he was mentioned in some of the ancient literature that were rare to find in the underworld. Even the top-ranked monsters avoided King Merdudun. It was told that when Merdudun was the king of Murlocs, the Murlocs were much stronger and revealed different kinds of miracles. Of course, not everything written was true. However, even if half of what was written were true, then even that was amazing. He couldn't find out about any further details, but it wouldn't have been just a normal item if it was the relics Merdudun left behind. Myung could understand why Heidegger decided to enter a demon god's territory even if it was dangerous. To Heidegger, the Marble of Territory was something he had to find. He probably wanted to call this territory his and stabilize it before he searched for the relics. It was possible that the relics played a crucial role in Heidegger gaining so much strength 10 years later. His heartbeat quickly rose. It's perfect. Myung switched his gaze. On Heidegger's right wrist, the status viewer was still working. It was proof that his achievements still valid, as he wasn't completely dead when he was turned into an undead. It was a chance to succeed in the trial and gain the relics of King Merdudun. Make Heidegger into a living undead and earn relics on top of that? This was truly killing two birds with one stone. Lead me. I will continue to find the relics of King Merdudun. A crisis turned into an opportunity. And Weung wouldn't let go of this chance. Chapter 59. A remote desert area. A structure was being built in a location right behind a cliff. Pyramid. It was definitely a pyramid around 10 m tall. Tens of people were cutting, moving and stacking huge rocks. So this is the symbolic icon he was going to use to declare his territory. To use the marble of territory, you needed a symbolic icon to define it. The symbolic icon would become some kind of totem and change the surrounding area around it. It was a type of arrangement made for humans to live in this world. And that pyramid. A king's tomb. Weung rubbed his chin. He understood why Heidegger used a pyramid as a symbolic icon. Heidegger made it for the trial and finding the relics of King Merdudun. The pyramid was in its finishing stages as the people of skin and bones worked hard in moving the rocks. You came. As Weung and Heidegger entered the small village, an old man came up to them and dropped to his knees. He greeted them very devotedly as he placed his forehead onto the ground. Weung could feel he was extremely terrified. Weung could understand how Heidegger ran this place by looking at all the injuries of the people working here. As there wasn't anything that resembled a house, it seemed like they were overworked with not enough rest or food. There was only a large tent. It was probably the place arranged for Heidegger. Weung moved his gaze. Slap. Slop. And about 5 people were whipping people urgently. Gah! Foam came out of a young man's mouth as he collapsed. He was whipped immediately, but as the man showed no signs of getting up, he was tossed to the ground. Like throwing away garbage. However, no one seemed to care. I'll wipe it for you. The old man went on his knees, took out a cloth and started to rub Heidegger's shoes. While he was doing it, he looked at Weung with doubtful eyes. It seemed like he didn't know how to act towards Weung. If it was a guest Heidegger brought, he needed to serve him well, but if he wasn't, he would be smacked with a club. However, Weung wasn't interested in that kind of treatment. Weung entered the tent after looking around for a bit. Heidegger was more than a king here. Everything was accomplished by his words. If he told them to die, they really needed to die. And what ruled them was complete fear. The fear paralyzed their rationality and made them into puppets. How long till it's finished? It should be finished in 2 weeks. Heidegger replied as Weung asked him inside the tent. There were only 2 of them inside the tent. It seemed like a place only Heidegger could enter. As people were shaken the moment Weung entered that place. Nevertheless, they seemed to recognize Weung as an important guest, as Heidegger never gave them any orders. Anyways, 2 weeks. That's enough time. Weung sat on a chair and rested his chin on his hand and planned his schedule for a moment. If he obtained the relics of King Merdudun, he would basically gain the most effective way to move in the demon god's territory. Afterwards, he could use the little wish to find out where Headley's cow is. Even if it was the little wish, it would not be able to continuously tell him of its location. Therefore, it was best to use it right before he started to search for it. Weung got up and took Heidegger's status viewer. And looked through his history. He was able to find out what trials Heidegger had completed and which ones he was in the progress of completing in the history of his status viewer. It was possible to read the trials and steal from them in the progress. In the past, Murlocs controlled water and were rulers of the lakes and the oceans. They performed all kinds of miracles using spears and staves made out of pearls. There was even a countless number of sages of the ocean. But, after the death of King Merdudun, they quickly degraded and became smaller in size and decreased in intelligence. Can the Murlocs revive when someone finds the relics of King Merdudun? Extract from the time of Murlocs. The place known as the Heart of Murloc. You have found the map where the location of relics of King Murtyudun is revealed. You have reached the location on the map. You can become a descendant of Murloc if you proclaim a territory and build a tomb to celebrate King Murtyudun. Quests regarding the relics of King Murtyudun were written in order. However, there wasn't anything that was specifically written. It was difficult to confirm specific details just by simply reading his history. However, Muyong now knew that he needed to proclaim a territory to become a descendant of Murloc. How can I find the relics? Pyramid automatically becomes a dungeon. They are inside. Indeed. It meant that it wasn't simply a symbolic icon. It meant that the pyramid itself became a dungeon for a trial. It was quite an interesting story. New dungeon. There must be a lot of rewards that can be earned. It was a dungeon. They normally didn't call a dungeon if it was a place you could clear in a day or two. It was standard procedure to slowly attack towards the final level. Of course, there would be an overflowing amount of things to be gained during the process. He would have to routinely come back out to organize everything, and to do this, he needed to make some changes here. It's not bad to make a territory here inside the demon god's territory. He was declaring a territory for the first time. It seemed a bit of a waste to just get the relics and leave this place alone, as the marble of territory was very rare to get. As people were already here, and depending on Muyong's thoughts, it didn't seem impossible to develop this place into a territory. Even though he would only use it for a place to stay momentarily, if he became the lord of this territory and maintained the dungeon, he could earn additional profit. Like specific talismans or rare medicinal herbs. In reality, there were few cities that were built near a dungeon. It might be difficult if monsters flooded out from the dungeon, but there were still much more to gain from it. The monsters around this place are all low rank. It's not bad when I think about the future. Demon God's territory. If you made a city near the great city, everyone would keep others in check and try to steal it, but if he was to proclaim the territory here, who would interfere? It would be better to give up if there were strong monsters near this place, but that wasn't the case. It seemed possible to organize the location by releasing a few undead. Although there were less than 100 people, he didn't think it was bad if he looked far ahead. Either way, he wouldn't lose anything from trying. Protect this place. I will come back after roaming around. I understand. Heidegger stiffly nodded. Muyong went outside the tent. He felt everyone's gazes, but no one stopped Muyong from walking his path. Muyong left the village and came back when it was night. However, countless undead were moving the corpses of giant scorpions and fire foxes behind him. He stacked them up in the middle of where people were gathered. As people looked at the small hill in wonder, Muyong spoke. Eat the contents and with the rest make clothes and houses. That was all. Muyong entered the tent once again. However, people were unable to move easily. In this place, you needed permission to even talk. However, Heidegger didn't show any response. It was only natural, as they were a group who were basically rejected of their free will. However, even the next day, and the day after, Muyong continued to transport the corpses of monsters. After the fourth day, a person moved for the first time. A young man who could no longer bear the hunger greedily devoured the corpse of the fire fox. And then, waited for his punishment as his eyes became a bit clearer. No one survived after they acted like this. Everyone was horrendously killed by Heidegger or his comrades. However, there was no punishment. Then, all the people who studied each other's faces started to move. They ate the meat of the monsters and made clothes with its fur. They built a place to stay using the huge carcass of scorpions. That didn't mean they weren't building the pyramid. Instead, they worked harder. I don't need puppets in my territory, he thought as he looked at the scene in front of him. Undead were enough as puppets. Even if Muyong was going to declare this land as his territory, he wasn't going to do much to develop this place. He needed the rest of the people to develop it on their own. To do this, he needed to revive the people's free will. The results weren't bad. As people started to loosen up, they now started to think. Who was that man? The man who ordered Heidegger around and pinned him down. The man who hunted monsters, ordered undead and brought darkness wherever he went. Who are you? They could only ask after a week had passed. Everyone nervously waited in front of the tent Myung stayed in. That day, Myung took off his helmet for the first time. Everyone noticed his white hair, deep dark eyes and a horn on his head. Everyone was mesmerized. Myung replied shortly. Think however you want. Everyone had doubtful looks on their eyes. They thought a new owner had appeared to replace Heidegger had shown up, but even he said to think however they wanted. It could be considered as irresponsible, but Myung didn't care at all. I know how Heidegger treated you guys. However, I will guarantee your freedom unlike before as long as you don't raise your sword against me. Myung wasn't the type to speak eloquently. He just wanted to state the truth. If you want to live, get up. Build up this place and develop the surroundings. After all, you guys won't be able to leave the demon god's territory. If you just stay still, you will only become food for the monsters that might raid in. He mercilessly hammered a nail in their chests. Every single word he said was true. If Myung didn't appear, they would have been abandoned by Heidegger and would have faced a tragic end. However, things were now different. They could change. This chance was given by Myung. However, it was completely their decision on whether they were going to accept this chance or not. I don't care what you guys think of me as. Choose whatever you want and move accordingly. Myung wasn't self-conscious about other people's thoughts of him. Either way, these people could not leave this place, and to live, they needed to struggle. He didn't need to hold on to the title as Lord because all he wanted was to reap rewards from this process. If he acted like a lord, he would have to continue to act as one, and that would only waste his time. That wasn't the best decision when he was in a situation where it wouldn't be enough if he ran everywhere. Myung turned his back and once again went out the village. The pyramid was completed in 11 days. It was 3 days faster than the expected date. Immediately, Myung climbed the very top of the pyramid. And then placed the marble of territory on an altar that was already prepared. I, Myung, declare this territory as mine. There was no need for a grand ceremony just because he declared it. These words were enough. Blaze. The marble emitted a purple light that spread out in all directions. At the same time, the pyramid shook as it slowly changed. He needed to leave before the changes really started to occur. Or else, he might never be able to leave this place. As Myung was planning to move. Chapter 60. Myung's eyes widened as he read the continuously appearing messages. He expected to find the dungeon where the relics of King Murtyudun were buried and for him to become a descendant of Murlocs, but he never expected that he would find the continuation of the Demon King of the 27th Legion quest here. Myung had found the location of the shrine of Gremory, the demon god of the 56th seat, when he had returned to the past and was at the Blue Temple. He earned the qualification to become the Demon King of the 27th Legion by passing the most difficult trial at a place with a hexagram, the Star of David. Afterwards, he didn't gain any more clues and had forgotten about it for a bit. Gremory has 26 legions. Gremory, the demon god who held the 56th seat. It was told that she was the only female demon god, and under her were 26 loyal demon kings. Normally, there wasn't a 27th demon king. And in the past, when demon gods were destroying humanity, Gremory never appeared. She was one of the few demon gods who weren't against humanity. Becoming a demon king of Gremory and gaining strength was definitely one of the choices Myung could choose. A thorn in their mouths. That was it. A thorn in their mouths. He was planning on being a pain that would pierce through their tongues and their heads. So that he couldn't be swallowed. He would possess a strong poison that if the demon gods attempted to swallow him, they would die one after another. He never thought that he would get a clue in this place and for this territory to be the starting point. It might have been different if he never found it in the first place, but it was currently in his reach. Now, it was his decision to grab hold of this opportunity or to leave it alone as if he never saw it in the first place. Grab it. He made a quick decision. To go with the flow. There was definitely a risk to it, but there was a lot more to be gained in return. It was worth the gamble. However, to do this he needed to develop this territory. Even though his first initial plans of not caring about being a lord didn't work out, he didn't care. Plans were always meant to be flexible. He needed to at least account for that much flexibility. It said that the skill had changed. Right away, Myung opened his skills window to check what had been changed and what had been added. Skill title, the Demon King of the 27th Legion, A+. Description: the qualifications to become the Demon King of the 27th Legion. Gremory originally had 26 legions. Only Demon Kings were able to command the 26 legions and every one of them possessed tremendous power. Asterisk first step. All basic stats are increased by 5. Skill title, Lord, F. Description: a skill only given to those who control a territory. The rank will increase the larger your territory becomes and the more your influence rises. Special structures are included as well. Methods for increasing your territory are using the Marble of Territory or gambling your territory in a fight with other territory owners, among others. Asterisk able to assign territory guardian, only one per territory, and depending on the territory, additional stats and skill are earned. Only effective inside the territory. Not bad. The newly added part in the Demon King of the 27th Legion skill was an increase in stats. It was very good if all his stats were increased by 5. And looking at how it said it was the first one, it looked like there was room for more. The Lord skill was obvious. But, he was a bit interested in the Territory Guardian. These guardians that existed in each city were very strong. Not just humans, there were cases where tamed monsters or summoned creatures would become the Territory Guardian. This was because the humans chosen to be guardians would frequently betray it and the territory would collapse. Anyways, it was best to choose someone who you could trust, and in that part, Myung had no worries. As there was no way an undead would betray him. Status. He decided to check the changes in his stats as well. As soon as he turned the status viewer, his status appeared. Achievement effect. Gremory's Anguish, A. +3 to all abilities. Azura's Vassal, A. The strength to deal with spirits and devil's power, spirit ability increased by 10. Soulmate, B+. From now on, if you commune with an undead, the undead's stats will slightly increase permanently. Descendant of Murlocs, B+. Increased growth of Murlocs. Fairy's Blessing, B. Allows fairies to feel familiar with the user. Class effect. Death Lord, Lord class, Ruler of Death. Stats. Strength 112, 80 plus 32, Agility 124, 91 plus 33. Stamina 109, 84 plus 25, Intelligence 77, 55 plus 22. Wisdom 73, 51 plus 22, Fighting Aura 73, 55 plus 18. Magic Resistance 65, 47 plus 18, Spirit Ability 43, 15 plus 28. Special note, Fighting Aura has been awakened. Completed the first metamorphosis. Equipped and invoked equipment, Anguish, Strength plus 14, Ogre's Cruelty, Lunatic Sovereign's Set, all stats plus 15, Stamina plus 10, Shadow Armor, it allows you to teleport to a shadow within your vision 3 times a day, Wicked Belt, Intelligence and Wisdom plus 4, all undead are strengthened by 5%, and Hermes's Boots, Agility plus 15, 3 seconds of acceleration. Although his supporting effects were quite significant, his physical stats were all over 100. And since his other core stats were almost all above 70, you could say his growth was outstanding. Also, it was surprising that his basic stats had increased by 5 when he received the additional effect of the Demon King of the 27th Legion skill. Because of that, he was approaching the limit known as the First Awakening. I've already experienced metamorphosis. I wonder if another change will occur when my important basic stats are above 100. Of course, since everyone was different, there was no need to have every stat above 100, if they were close, they would experience an awakening. However, Muyong had already forcefully experienced the first metamorphosis through Vice Chieftain Augur. But, he was curious if he would undergo another physical change once he breaks through the approaching wall. At this rate, he would know in the near future. It was something that he would know only after his body had experienced it. It was the same for the descendant of Murloc's achievement effect. He was currently unsure what it entailed. Crash. Thud. I have to get out of here. He had wasted too much time checking the changes. Muyong quickly moved away. A purple light submerged the territory. The dead land changed and revitalized. Grass grew and a small pond formed. A phenomenon that occurred only because Muyong became the owner of the territory. Land humans could live on was completed. And Muyong, who had exited the pyramid, couldn't help but frown. Please accept us. An old man and around 90 people behind him bowed. They folded their legs and kneeled. A typical posture of submission. I did tell them to do whatever they wanted, but only a few days have passed. Accept you? When Muyong asked, the old man raised his head. We sincerely ask you to become our new owner. It was all so sudden. The old man, who continued to look at him, said. We are all weak. We could only hold our breaths under Heidegger's tyranny. However, you said to do whatever we want. We put our heads together and thought. In the end, we realized the only way to live was this one. So you're telling me, you will live leaning on me? A last-ditch effort for survival. Since he decided to grow his territory, it wasn't bad, but it didn't mean he would accept them as they were now. The old man nodded his head at Muyong's sarcastic remark. Yes, we want to live. We know you are different from us, but we want to believe your words that you won't make us live in constant fear like Heidegger. We will grow and develop. We all agreed to be citizens of your territory, so our lives will be in your hands. He said that he would give Muyong the authority to decide their life and death to survive. Though it was contradictory, because it was, Muyong liked it. Since it was more honest than speaking in circles with flowery language. It could be the strength of the experienced. He was able to understand Muyong's motives and speak without constraint. It still wasn't bad. Not everyone could quickly realize reality. It was easy to say, but his decisiveness was praiseworthy. The experiences he possessed were definitely valuable. It seemed like it would be useful in the development of the territory. 94 people hoped to become citizens. Do you accept? Muyong gazed at each of the 94 people's eyes. A light of hope shone in their dying eyes. At the very least, they didn't look like puppets. He wanted everyone to be citizens with free will. Muyong nodded his head. Okay. I accept. Perhaps it was because the rank was so low, but it increased just by accepting citizens. And becoming a lord was similar to founding a guild. But, what was different was that he would be able to force them. Those who refused Muyong's summons would be penalized. They would be cursed, and there were even cases where they lost the power of their talismans. Solomon arranged this in hopes of uniting humanity. Although there were cases where this was abused. Also, as long as Muyong didn't die or no one stole the territory, they would forever live affiliated to the name Muyong. The word citizen carried that much weight to it. I will not take those who stop and fall behind. If you want to follow me, you have to advance yourselves. Even then, Muyong clearly drew a line. He had no time to wait for those who fell behind. We greet our Lord. The old man shouted loudly with a serious face. We greet our Lord. And the rest opened their mouths in unison. Myung slowly returned to the tent once again. Everyone turned their bodies towards the tent and kneeled. This ceremony continued until the sun set and the moon rose. 24 hours had passed. At the same time, a short message appeared. Myung immediately headed for the dungeon. But there were a few people who arrived before him. One young man and woman as well as the old man. The old man spoke when he spotted Myung. "Lord, they are young and quick children. They will be helpful to you." The two definitely looked more fit than the others. They were also the only good-looking man and woman. They wore pelts that barely covered their important parts and had a dagger made from the carcass of the desert crayfish. They thought of themselves as porters as they were even holding bags. The two deeply bowed towards Myung. "I am called Baltan." "Lord, I am Irene." Myung momentarily looked at the old man. He could read the obvious motives for bringing the two. He was trying to develop promising children. It wasn't possible for everyone to become strong at once, so he was trying to send out the ones with potential. Myung pondered for a moment and said, "Follow me." It wasn't bad for his citizens to get stronger, since it would allow him to claim the surrounding territories more quickly. He didn't see any other motives besides that. Baltan and Irene nodded with serious expressions. Myung entered the dungeon with quiet footsteps.